In this video, Whitney Webb exposes how the ruling elite want to control us. They have plans that'll give them control of everything from Bitcoin to Dogecoin, even XRP. Let's hear what Whitney Webb has to say about these plans by the ruling elite.
So yeah, there's been a push for several years, but now it's gaining an insane amount of momentum in steam. But it really goes back several years. And the goal is to have a regulated internet, which means the end of online privacy and anonymity. And they want to do this by having people link a government-issued ID to their internet access and internet activity. A lot of government policy, whether it's about this or something else, doesn't come organically from the government. It comes from think tanks. It comes from groups like that, or even the WEF, the World Economic Forum, that are then given to politicians, and politicians legislate and enact it, and then the state enforces it. But it's not necessarily the ideas of the legislature and the state itself, these policies. And more often than not, these think tanks are funded by corporations and billionaires and all of these guys. And they also own the politicians, so it's really them creating the policy. And they use the state as an enforcer to force it on the public, right? So that's, I guess, the global public-private partnership is what my colleague Ian Davis calls they, right? And I think it's pretty fair. He puts the BIS at the top, by the way, of the pyramid. This policy, one of the earliest iterations of it, at least in the United States, was during the Obama administration. They called it a driver's license for the internet. The idea of, in order to access the internet, when you set up, internet connection at your house, the internet service provider links all of your internet traffic to your ID. And in doing so, the government and the signals intelligence arm or intelligence agency of the government then has access to not just everything you're posting and writing online, but also everything you read and consume online.
And everything you buy.
And everything you buy. Totally. I mean, this whole push is completely related to ending financial anonymity and financial privacy as well. It's a completely interrelated thing. And I've done pretty extensive deep dives on this going back to probably like 2021. Because it's very tied up with how they're likely to force this regulated internet on the populace. Because they're not just going to be like, let's do this now. I mean, people aren't going to go along with it. So they need some sort of event that gets people angry and afraid and panicking in order to stick it through. So basically, this is going to be folded into, I guess, what I would call a Cyber Patriot Act. The Patriot Act being the legislation pushed through in the U.S. after September 11th, 2001. Right. A lot of which wasn't necessarily related to anything to do with 9/11, but was a huge power grab by the state taking advantage opportunistically of the panic after 9/11. So they need some sort of event like that to ram all this stuff through. But the plans have been on the books for a very long time, and it's not just the US, it's really everywhere. They have all these different excuses. Exactly. A lot of it, like the online safety bill, they'll say, oh, it's about protecting children. But really, it's about ending encryption, which law enforcement in the UK and the US have been trying to do so hard for years and years and years. I mean, Bill Barr, who was Attorney General under Trump in the US, was like, that was his main policy goal, was to end encryption. And he talked about it all the time, but a lot of people didn't really pay attention, I guess. But in the UK, it's a similar push because, of course, as I'm sure you're aware, the UK national security state and the US national security state are very intertwined, specifically signals intelligence, the whole Five Eyes alliance, which is obviously includes more countries, but it's UK and US dominated, obviously. It's not like Australia and New Zealand are running the show there, So in terms of what we're talking about with government, regulation of the internet and all of this, it's coming, right? We're already seeing the first signs of it here. There's an obvious push to censor more speech and link people's speech to their ID and have it more surveillable than ever before. Gutting encryption, why do they want to do that? So they can read everything that you say and all your transactions, follow them all. There's a similar effort in crypto, and specifically with Bitcoin, to criminalize mixers and criminalize any sort of service that affords you increased financial privacy. It's already started, but what I'm trying to say is that, where they want to take this, if anyone uses a mixer, they can go after you. That's what they want to set up. They don't want anyone to have financial privacy or online privacy anymore. And that's what part of this agenda about a regulated internet is. And it directly ties in with stuff like a central bank digital currency, at least what people are concerned about a CBDC for, which is the surveillance capability and the programmability aspect. It's all tied up with this effort to regulate the internet, which isn't really fair to say it's regulating the internet. It's more like taking complete control of the internet, a complete coup of the internet for unprecedented surveillance and control of people's online lives. At the same time that you have these same entities pushing for people to live their lives online as much as possible, as part of the fourth industrial revolution and all of this other stuff. Like we saw in the COVID era, we're locking down. You can't go out and do stuff in the physical world. You have to be online as much as possible. Education's online. Work is online. As much of your life as possible has to be online now because you can't go in person to the bank. You can't go in person to this. You should order your groceries through your phone and all of this stuff, So they're pushing us more and more into the digital realm, and at the same time preparing to take more control of the digital realm than they have now by a significant degree. And that's not a coincidence. I'm sorry if you think that's coincidental. That's very naive of you.
This regulated internet that Whitney Webb talks about that are linked to our ID sounds so bad. This is going to be extremely prone to abuse if the government can track everything we see and everything that we try and buy. Think about their attack that they had on Ripple. If it is a security, which is what they were pushing for, they get information on us, who is buying, who is selling. They have control of the information. They have control knowing who is accessing that cryptocurrency. They want to do that with every single cryptocurrency. That is why they are fighting, trying to claim that all these cryptocurrencies are securities, even though we know that they are not. They also want to criminalize things like Tornado Cash or other mixers, as she mentioned, that give us privacy in crypto. Anything that gives you privacy, whether it's a privacy coin or these different mixers, they want to criminalize that. They want to stop you from having access to that, because if you have privacy, it means they don't know what you are doing, and they want to know what are you doing with your money. That way they can control you.
Well, okay, so obviously when you're talking about the powers that be, there's competing factions, right? Not all of them agree, but they agree about a lot of the stuff. And a lot of the way these people operate isn't that similar to how rulers operated hundreds of years ago. They want complete and control of money and political power and power more broadly, because then they can do whatever they want for themselves and have a double standard for themselves, but force other people to live a certain way to support their lifestyle, right? And essentially what we're seeing here is an effort to use technology to entrench that in unprecedented ways so that there's no more need to worry about the peasants revolting. I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. So as an example, this push for a regulated internet and the end of online anonymity and all of that is directly related to the fact that it's a mathematical inevitability that our debt-based monetary system will collapse at some point, and that the banking system, particularly Wall Street and its global equivalents, have engaged in an unprecedented degree of malfeasance and corruption and insane financial gambling activities. And just like 2008, right? That's going to explode at some point. But in 2008, people knew it was the banks and they were mad at the banks, weren't they? So if you're the banks and that's going to happen again, and you're in bed with the intelligence agencies and the government, or in the case of the US, you own the central bank, right? You don't want that to happen again. So how do you find a way to blame somebody else for the financial system imploding? And when you bring the financial system back, what do these people, people like Jamie Dimon and all these top bankers, like what is their ideal scenario for money and how people interact with and use money? Well, being able to grift as much as you want and take as much as you want from the people under you without them knowing or complaining, because that's what they've been doing for decades, right? Wall Street. So they want to keep doing that. They don't want to change their behavior. So they want to find a way to be able to steal from the underclass as much as possible without the underclass complaining or revolting, and control how they spend their money and control their financial and other behavior so that they can maintain their place on the top. So what we're having is the engineering of a neo-feudal society where you have the small upper class and then a massive underclass that the upper class can manipulate and control and, do whatever they want with as they see fit. And so that's what I think the ambition of a lot of these various initiatives we're seeing for unprecedented control and surveillance are aimed at. And the goal is to use technology, whether it's AI or any of these other emerging technologies, to be able to do that, because obviously there's so much more of us than there are of them. And so in order to scale what they want to scale, to be able to deal with the huge difference in size between their class and our class, they feel like, they need these emerging technologies. They need AI. And that's why I see AI as a largely negative thing, because the people that want to do this are the ones setting it up and programming it and deciding what its objectives are. In terms of the behavior of like a ruling elite, it's very similar to what it was in the feudal era, like in the Dark Ages, which again, how did the Dark Ages succeed so successfully in that? Extreme control of information. It was all in the church, right? No one knew how to read and write but them. So it was again, centralized control of information and also of money. And we're going to that same paradigm again, but for the modern era. So all this technology is going to try and set up those systems for us. And I think people need to be really aware of all these, in the next couple of years, without a doubt, there's going to be these events, whether it's like COVID or 9/11 or whatever, they're not going to be the same as those, but they're going to be these big events that generate a lot of fear and panic, and mainstream media is going to be traumatizing people with it, and then are going to sell a particular solution. And when it comes for the internet, or the financial system, they're going to make the enemy privacy. They're going to make the enemy privacy 100%. And the solution is going to be digital IDs and programmable, surveillable money. It doesn't have to be CBDCs, by the way. I mean, CBDCs, I think most people know, are going to be that, but it doesn't, it's not just CBDCs. There is a goal, there is a push from the banks themselves, some of the most powerful banks in the world, to have, at least in some countries, a different system that's not a CBDC, because with a CBDC, they can't do fractional reserve banking. And so that's what deposit tokens are all about. Tokenizing deposits, and you can make those programmable and you can surveil them. And it's really just like a CBDC, but they won't call it that. But then the bank controls all the reserves, and maybe they'll bank some of their reserves at the Fed, or whatever, but they can still do fractional reserve banking and credit creation and all of this stuff, and not actually have to keep a one-to-one peg of reserves like CBDCs or like a fiat peg stablecoin. And so there's a push for that too, at an international level. It's not just in the U.S., but it's definitely happening in the U.S. And I would argue that's one of the reasons that you have the Federal Reserve, which is again owned by Wall Street banks in the U.S., being like, we're not going to do a direct issued CBDC, and freedom advocates in the U.S. are like, yeah, the Fed's on our side because of that. No, it's not. The Fed is 100% always on the side of Wall Street banks, and Wall Street banks only don't want a CBDC because they don't want to give the Federal Reserve their power. They want to keep their power, and they want to keep doing fractional reserve banking.
These ruling elite are so set on trying to control our access to information and our access to assets. They want things like the CBDCs as a way to limit our privacy with the disguise of trying to protect us. They want to stop criminal activity. They want to stop terrorism. That's why they want CBDCs. Sure, yeah, right. Really what they want is be able to have control. With CBDCs, they can know who is buying and selling. They can know who is interacting. They can also stop certain people from interacting, because unlike something like a Bitcoin, they have full control. They can go, hey, you spoke out against the government. You are not allowed to transact anymore.
I don't know. I think there's a lot of people in Congress that get into Congress campaigning on certain issues, and then once they're there long enough, they backtrack completely. There's a lot of examples of that historically and currently in the U.S. for sure. So, I mean, Elizabeth Warren is garbage. The DNC got all this money, from Sam Bankman-Fried? How anti-crypto are they really? I think it's they're willing to play ball and set up regulations and be the kingmakers in the crypto industry. I think there's a lot of, I think that's going to happen. And then they're going to try and nix everything that doesn't serve them. And again, financial privacy being the main thing that doesn't serve them. But they also want to give unprecedented control to the DOJ to go and contact any crypto exchange or even Tether, right? And be like, freeze these wallets. We've decided those wallets need to be frozen. So that's escalating, obviously. And, the whole thing that happened with Binance is like a big push towards that as well, because now Binance is basically going to have a chaperone appointed by the U.S. government, basically in charge of everything. Their chief compliance officer is a guy that used to work for, the Department of Justice. Because so a big complaint about Binance from the DOJ is that they were allowing people that were subjected to U.S. sanctions to use their service, but they're not really like a U.S. company, are they? But the U.S. government, the U.S. is an empire. They want to be able to go to any country and say, you can't do that. We're actually in charge. You know what I mean? So Binance not being under their thumb and being active in all these other countries, allowing people in Iran to use their services, for example. That was a big sticking point for them. It wasn't like criminals, terrorists in Iran. It was just like people in Iran. They're subject to U.S. sanctions. You're not complying with U.S. sanctions. And so we're going to charge you $1 billion and take out your chief executive and put our people in charge. This is the mafia, guys. I wrote a 1,000-page book about how the government is in the U.S. is organized crime, specifically the Department of Justice, and that's what they're doing. And keep in mind too, the DOJ has an insane amount of Bitcoin it holds, and they want more.
Yeah.
And they want to seize Bitcoin from what? Well, I definitely think Bitcoin has the potential to be a tool for financial freedom, but I think there's major efforts well underway to co-opt that to serve the same agenda, right? And so I think people in the Bitcoin space that want it to be a tool for financial freedom need to get wise to those efforts to co-opt and resist, because it's either a tool of financial freedom or it's not. You know what I mean? And so if you cede enough territory and let them like completely dollarize Bitcoin and turn it into like a tool of U.S. empire to keep the dollar afloat and keep dollar hegemony going forever and ever and ever, and are saying it's a flaw in Bitcoin that you can't put dollars easily on Bitcoin and all of this. No. The whole point, supposedly, right, of creating Bitcoin was to give Wall Street banks the middle finger and create something that had immutable, sound monetary policy. Correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you allow them to co-opt it so it's not those things anymore, what are you left with?
The same old world.
Is it a tool of financial freedom, or is it just has the promise of Bitcoin been hollowed out and replaced with Wall Street garbage?
Is that what you think the issue there, like ETFs? Are you alluding to the ETFs?
There's all sorts of things
that
are happening in Bitcoin right now that could be under that umbrella. But when you start to have people like Blackrock being like, you know what, we actually like Bitcoin now, that's a sign to pay attention. You know what I mean? So I think people need to, in the Bitcoin space, need to be very aware that there is a fight being had right now about the future of Bitcoin. And you have to decide which side you're on. Are you going to fight for Bitcoin to be a tool of financial freedom, or are you going to allow it to be co-opted by the powers that be that it was supposedly designed to resist them and, be something they can't control? Are you going to give them control of it? The answer should be no to any Bitcoiner worth respecting, in my opinion.
If we want crypto to be used for a tool for freedom, we have to fight back against this government control. If we allow the government and these other ruling elites to control cryptocurrency, then they control everything. They're trying to remove cash. They're trying to force you to use credit cards. They're trying to force you to use these digital assets because they can track it all. They will know what are you buying, when are you buying it, and they can restrict you from using your assets. Again, this is why they try to stop Ripple. Why they're trying to stop other cryptocurrencies is because they want control. And if we want to actually have cryptocurrency be a means for us to have freedom, we have to continue to fight back against their attacks, just like they attacked Ripple or XRP. They're going to continue to attack other cryptocurrencies, and they'll probably try to attack XRP again in the future. These elites are relentless, but we need to be more relentless in stopping their attacks. Now, if you want to hear more of these amazing insights that Whitney Webb has, make sure you guys go ahead, like and subscribe down below, and leave a comment letting me know that you want to hear more of her amazing insights.